Hello, Erica here, and I'm here today to continue on with my favorite classics series. I have two videos in this series already. I did an overall video of just my favorite classics ever. Then I did a video of my favorite classics from 1900 to 1930. And today we're going to talk about my favorite classics from 1930 to 1950. So some of them could be loosely considered modern classics, though the term modern classics is so vague and means different things to different people, which is a different video for a different day. So, I have 5 books to show you today, and let's get started. I just realized that I chose all American works of literature for this video. I didn't mean to solely choose American classics, so I might have to go back and do a separate video from this time period that does not at all focus on American literature. So I guess I should really call this my favorite American classics from 1930 to 1950. The first book I have to show you was published in 1936 in the US, and that is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I am completely aware that this book is problematic, so you don't have to get scathing angry in the comments. I am very much aware that this book is problematic. That does not necessarily take away my love for Scarlett and the kind of sweeping love story that evolves in this book. It doesn't take away my love for Scarlett as a female character, a strong female character, and a very unique female character in American literature, especially up until this point. For those of you who don't know, this is a classic Southern American novel. It is set during the Civil War in the United States in the South, in Georgia, and follows our heroine, Scarlett O'Hara, as her family's plantation is kind of destroyed and she has to rise from the wreckage. So I do really love this book. But again, even though I love this story, there are some issues with this book in terms of how the black characters are portrayed. They're portrayed very much as caricatures and have no real depth of their own. I will say, though, that the treatment of the black characters in the book is much better than the movie. The movie did, where the book failed, the movie failed 10 times more. So there is that. So if you've seen the movie and not read the book, just be aware that the black characters do have a little bit more to them in the book than they do in the movies, but it's still not nearly enough. Anyway, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Next book I have is quite a contrast and was published just the year after Gone with the Wind, and that is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This was published in 1937. This is, of course, Hurston's most famous work, and it's absolutely fantastic. This is the story of Janie, who is a young black woman living in the South, and kind of the story of her own self-discovery through love affairs with multiple men in different stations of life. I highly recommend this if you have not read this already. I know that people say that the dialect can be a little bit hard to get into, and what I always recommend when you have issues with dialect is to read a little bit of it out loud to yourself. All of it, if you have to, that's fine, but if you can kind of bring life to the words, they tend to make a lot more sense than trying to figure it out in your head. But if you start to say it out loud, after that, you can kind of carry on. And also, this just settles into a really beautiful rhythm, and the language is so stunning despite the difficulties that I know some people have with it. So again, I can highly recommend this. And where Gone with the Wind was very problematic in its depictions of race, of course, Their Eyes Are Watching God is kind of a landmark work of African-American fiction, and especially for African-American women's fiction. So highly recommend this. Again, Their Eyes Were Watching God. The next book I have, I got to kind of late. I had been assigned it in multiple literature classes throughout my life and had never read it in its entirety for God knows what reason. But I finally read it about 2 years ago, and I have not been able to stop thinking about this book since then. That is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is, of course, a very important piece of literature in the American canon. It was published in 1939 and follows a family migrating from Oklahoma out to California during the Great Depression. For those of you who haven't read The Grapes of Wrath yet, you may not know that there are kind of two storylines at play in this book where we are very closely following this family who's migrating west to find work in California, but interspersed with those chapters are these chapters that kind of focus on the bigger picture with just little snippets here and there from what's going on throughout the rest of the Western United States during this time. So they're very generic and universal chapters that have really stuck with me just as much as the story of the family. The ending of this book is very famous. It's very devastating. It broke my heart. I cannot recommend this highly enough. I have now read this and I believe 4 or 5 other of Steinbeck's works, and this is by far my favorite, though I do have yet to get to East of Eden, and I have heard nothing but wonderful things about that, so I will do that soon. But for now, I will say that The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck is by far one of my favorite American classics. The next book I have may not surprise many of you. This was published in 1940, and this is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This, of course, is a classic American coming-of-age tale, and I believe I attempted to read this as a child a few times, but I didn't get around to it until just last year. This, of course, is mainly the story of Francie Nolan and her family as she grows up in poverty in Brooklyn in the early 20th century. I loved every single character in this book. I believe even more so than Francie was Francie's mother that really touched me, and I cannot get over it. So I think this will be a book that I read many, many more times. And again, it's just wonderful. If you have any interest at all in coming-of-age tales and maybe haven't had a chance to kind of break into classics yet, I think this would be a really wonderful place to start. The last book I have is actually a play, which is kind of strange for me on my channel. I don't know that I've ever actually talked about a play. But this is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. And I know I haven't talked about this on my channel before, but this book is very close to my heart. This is, of course, the story of Willie Loman and his family. Willie Loman is a traveling salesman. He's just trying to kind of grasp the American dream. And I read this around the same time that I read The Great Gatsby, so those themes of kind of how people try and live up to this amazing ideal of the American dream and fail in such devastating ways kind of ran through my life a lot at that point, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I have not read this in a very long time, and I really need to reread it, but I think about it every now and then, and I can definitely kind of connect the dots between the themes in this and other works written at the time, as well as contemporary literature. So, again, this is a short little thing, and it's a play, so, like, oh, look, I've annotated the crap out of it. So it's pretty easy reading, so, again, if you have not broken into classics yet, I highly recommend Arthur Miller. I also do really like The Crucible, but I love Death of a Salesman way more. And that's all I have today for some of my favorite American classics from 1930 to 1950. If you have read any of these and would like to discuss them in the comments, I would be happy to do so. If you have any book recommendations for me based on my love of these, I would also love to hear them. And if you have any favorite classics from this period in American history, please tell me about them. I would love to hear it. I will see you all soon. Bye!